I'm Scott.
I'm Nick.
Nick's starting. We're gonna do our presentation on this trip that we took. We started in San Diego, went up to Alaska, and did not go down to Argentina as we had originally planned. But Nick's gonna take it away now.
What happened? No tango.
All right. So these are some business cards that we had made to kind of hand out to people along the road. Did we bring any? We didn't.
They look like this.
Scott has one. So Scott and I met at Solid Rock in Poway about 5 years ago, and one of the first things that we ever talked about was his idea to go on this trip, and I immediately was like, can I come? And we didn't have the motorcycles yet or anything, but...
And I don't remember coming up with this idea, so... But Nick tells me I did.
Great idea.
Yeah, like 2 years later we were talking to people and he was like, oh, I think it was Nick's idea. I was like, no, that was yours. So anyways, we coordinated the purchase of our bikes. We wanted to have the same bike so that we only had to carry one set of spare parts. And, so this was kind of, it was about 1.5 years worth of planning before we left. So this was our original route. Obviously, starting in San Diego, we kind of headed up on the east side of the Sierras and then crossed over, went through Vancouver and Squamish, and then came kind of up here and then followed the same route up as we took down. We're going to take a boat across from Panama to Colombia, and then we were going to take a little cruise from Ushuaia to Antarctica. So that's about 20,000 miles plus about 5,000 miles for the drive up. So 25,000 miles total in about 5 months. We were going to take the last month to go down to Antarctica. So 5,000 miles a month is a lot, but so the plan was to climb in every state, province in Canada, and then country otherwise, which is 30 climbs altogether, so 3 provinces, 10 states, and 17 other countries. Our first stop was Yosemite. This is Scott on the way up Cathedral Peak in Tuolumne. We just kind of did a quick run up there to get started and then headed down into the valley. We have a tradition of bringing up beers with us in every climb we do so we can have a nice drink at the top and then rappel down and hopefully not kill ourselves. This is me climbing the east buttress of El Capitan in the valley on the next day. Yeah, Scott's turn.
Okay. So this is also on the east buttress. I'm giving my mahalos there. Is this loud enough? Okay. Yeah. So. Cool. Next slide. This is at the Mobile. If anybody of you guys know where that is, that's on the way out of Tuolumne towards the 395. This is looking out at Mono Lake, and we camped there, and it was beautiful. This is our next stop. We didn't do any climbing, but this is Lake Tahoe, and this is just us contemplating the scenery, motorcycles. Exciting stuff. And then this is Crater Lake, and this is I think this is all on the same day. So we're moving pretty quick. The idea was to go from San Diego up to Alaska pretty quick and then take our time on the way down. So no climbing in Crater Lake though. This is Smith Rock, and this is us at the summit of Wherever I May Roam. And so that was the climb that we did there, so yeah. This was at about 7 a.m. and we had our summit ciders, and it was a little intense at that point in time, but we got down safely and we were able to ride out that day. And this is also Smith Rock.
Yeah, so this is another picture at the peak of Wherever I May Roam, just kind of looking out at the river. If you guys haven't been to Smith Rock, go. It's awesome.
Where is it?
In Oregon. outside of, I forget, Bend, Oregon. Thank you. Too many Bends. So this is, so I took the picture from where we had our summit ciders, and Scott's at the peak of the climb there, looking with Mount Hood in the background. This is just outside of North Bend in Washington, at the base of Infinite Bliss, which I think is supposed to be the tallest sport climb in North America. Not North America, in the U.S. One of those. Yeah, I think it's 2,600 feet or 2,700 feet or something like that. So we camped at the bottom, and this was kind of our first meeting with the mosquitoes. They were pretty bad. Scott was getting pretty annoyed. So we just set up camp and immediately went to bed as soon as we got there, because we were getting up the next day to do this really big climb. That's another picture I took just from the opposite view, with our bikes in there. It is a beautiful forest. So the hike up, it's not very long. It's only about 45 minutes, but it's really steep. So it's a little heinous. We ended up, by the time we got to the top, this is the base of the climb. We were in the clouds, and the climb was soaking wet. So we decided against doing it. It was just not a good idea. And there were reports. I mean, there are some pitches where there's like one bolt or no bolts whatsoever, and no protection. So we decided maybe this wasn't the best day to climb this route.
This is just another picture at the base of Infinite Bliss, and you can see there's a waterfall running off of it, so clearly we're not going to climb this down. So our consolation climbing area was at this place called Neverland, and this is the Lost Boys Wall, and I think this is the top of a climb called the Plank. We have our summit beers in hand again. So, and then our next stop was in BC, and we had stayed at a friend's house for a few days, and then we went up to Squamish. And this is a climb called Stairway to Heaven, and this pitch right here is called the Traverse of the Gods. And there's 2 pitches of this. It's amazing. It's amazing. Like, you're just looking down at this beautiful view that you can partially see in this picture. And, like, the climbing's not hard or anything, but it's just incredible. And then this is us at the summit, and unfortunately this time we forgot our summit beers. So we're a little bit downcast here, but I did come away with a bootied 0.75 green Camelot, and that made up for it. So
so this is somewhere in northern BC. I think we drove for like 3 days straight, and we were still in the same province. And we were doing pretty long days at that point too, because we were just trying to get to the next province. BC is really big. So if you end up ever driving to Alaska or Yukon or something, just take that into consideration. Oh, right after this picture, I almost hit a moose. That was exciting. We have helmet communicators, and I was trying to get like a recording device going so I could kind of narrate the day. And then I look up at one point, and there's like a baby moose running across the highway in front of me. This is crossing into the Yukon, finally. This is the climbing that we did in Yukon at the Rusted Goat Wall on White Mountain, not too far from Whitehorse. We did all 3 climbs there. The beta to get there is pretty good. The parking lot's pretty good, but then it just gives you GPS coordinates to where the Rusted Goat Wall is. And we learned pretty quickly that there was no trail. So just for an hour and a half, we were just hiking through the bush, and Scott was getting annoyed with all the bugs in his face, and I was just right at home. It was like 3 mosquitoes. This is Scott rappelling off of the last climb that we did. He's pretty excited. And then finally crossing into Alaska. The The small clouds that you can see are right above the border station, and that was definitely a sign of things to come.
All right, so this is us, and so near Fairbanks, there's not a ton of climbing. So we found this little area called the East Grapefruit Rocks, and it's just a bunch of like single pitch sport climbing. Not too exciting, but honestly not what we really expected from Alaska. We were hoping to get on something a little bit bigger, but everything that we were considering sort of required a bush plane and a hike and all this other stuff. So this was really convenient, and you know, we got our Alaska climbing in, and you know, it checked the box. And the weather also wasn't what we were expecting. It was more like Hawaii than you would expect from Alaska. It was probably in the 80s, super humid, like not very pleasant. This is us, and this picture was taken at about 1:30 a.m. So lots of sunlight still. This is at Coldfoot. This is about halfway up the Dalton Highway, which is I think about 500 miles, 499 miles from Fairbanks to Prudhoe Bay, Alaska, which is the northernmost point you can get on a paved road in everywhere in the Americas, possibly everywhere. And the restaurant there makes a great club sandwich. This is coming through, what is this, Adigan Pass? Yep. Adigan Pass. This is probably this is the Brooks Range. Yep. And beautiful area, but probably the last set of mountains you're going to see before you get to Prudhoe Bay. After this, it's a lot of flatness and mosquitoes and marshes and dirt roads and more Dalton Highway. Super exciting. This is Dead Horse. This is about as far as you can get on a privately owned vehicle in Alaska. Yeah, that's about it.
And here we are standing in the Arctic Ocean. It wasn't as cold as I expected it to be, but it was definitely not comfortable. Some people jumped all the way in and they got little certificates saying they swam in the Arctic Ocean, but we just opted to go, you know, to the shins. It was cold enough. On the way back down, this is crossing back over the border of the Arctic Circle, south of Coldfoot. Yeah, Coldfoot is within the Arctic Circle. Here is Scott fixing his bike. On the way back down, Scott's chain fell off while we were not too far from the Yukon River crossing. His chain just shot out the back of his bike, and luckily I had a spare master link, so we were able to fix it and keep going.
And if you look a little closer, you can see that my saddlebag racks actually broke, and that happened on the way up, so this highway was just really taking its toll on our bikes, and there's more to come for sure.
So this is at the start of the Dalton Highway, which is actually a little bit north of Fairbanks. It's maybe 60 or 70 miles north of Fairbanks. The official start of the highway. It's not too far from where the pavement starts again. This again was on the way back south. And then 2 miles after this sign and 50 miles after Scott's chain fell off, my chain fell off. Same thing, the master link snapped, and probably can't see it, but my chain's chilling out over there. It literally broke 50 feet from the pavement. So this is the last bit of dirt road that you're going to see on the Dalton Highway, and I literally came to a stop right there. So we pushed the bike to this side of the road because there was a bit more room over here. And we weren't able to fix it in the field because we used my spare master link on Scott's chain. So I got a ride on the back of a Harley back to Fairbanks, and then they drove us back the next day in their SUV to fix the chain. But then I realized that on the way out, the chain snapped the push rod for my clutch, so I had to drive the rest of the way back to Fairbanks without a clutch, which was kind of fun because every time I had to stop, Scott had to put his kickstand down and give me a push start, and then run back and get on his bike and then follow me. So that was fun once we got into Fairbanks at all the red lights that we hit. Oh.
Yeah, so the Dalton Highway sucks on a motorcycle. So after all that, when Nick broke his clutch push rod, his bike had to go to the repair shop, so that took about a week, maybe a week and a half, like 8 days. And Nick flew back to San Diego, so I decided to take a little solo loop on my motorcycle down to Wrangell St. Elias National Park. And so this is on the way to Wrangell St. Elias, out to the abandoned mining colony of Kennecott and then the town of McCarthy. And I got caught in a mudslide, and my chain fell off there again, but luckily it wasn't broken. And this is me after I had repaired the bike and was ready to go. And then I got into McCarthy at about 1:30 a.m. and they put me, there was no vacancies at the motel, so they put me in the local drunk tank, and or the old town jail, and I was able to stay under a roof instead of having to set my tent up in the pouring rain. So that was really nice of the local bartender. This is Kennecott, so this is in Wrangell St. Elias National Park, and if you can see, this building right here is really nice and restored, and this one back here is really dilapidated. So this was a mining colony that was abandoned in, like, well, I don't know when it was abandoned, but it was abandoned way back in the day. And all these buildings are still dilapidated, but they're slowly restoring them all. It's actually a really cool piece of history to go look at. And then this is a sled dog from the teams in Denali National Park. And on a climbing related note, there were 3 dogs that were named Prusik, Munter, and Clove. So I thought that was pretty cool. This is when we were crossing back from Alaska into Yukon. We got stuck at the border because we arrived there like probably 10 minutes before the border was supposed to close, and they still didn't let us pass. So we got to go back and catch this amazing sunset. And honestly, it wasn't that bad, but I was bitter. This is in Dawson. And Nick's going to give you the story about the sourdough cocktail.
So we were really bitter that we got stuck at the border because we met up with some guys in Alaska who were telling us all about how awesome Dawson, Yukon is. They told us to go to this hotel and do the sourdough cocktail. So the sorry about that. So the sourdough cocktail, it's some guy who shows up at this hotel every night between the hours of 9 and 11 since 1973. 67,190 people have done this. He has a severed toe, a real toe. So you go to the bar and you buy a shot, and then you pay this guy $5 and he puts the toe in your shot, and you take the shot such that the toe comes down and touches your lips. So it's called kissing the sour toe. And I just thought that this was so absurd I had to do it. But we got stuck at the border, so we didn't get to make it into Dawson during sourdough cocktail hours. We were there the next morning at 9 a.m. and so we weren't willing to wait 12 hours since we were already like a week behind schedule. So we didn't get to kiss the sourdough, unfortunately.
And then this is us right before we rode into a really dark looking storm, so we're just sort of gearing up for that, which really sucks on a motorcycle, but maybe you have good gear, it's not, super bad. Alright, so then we ended up in Alberta, and this is near Canmore, and this is Hotling Peak. This is the climb that we had anticipated doing in Canmore. Oh, is it? Apparently it's Nick's turn again.
There's an important slide I need to talk about. So the climb we did was kind of right up the array actually. It's 1,700 feet, 510D. It was the hardest big climb that we did. This is Scott climbing and me climbing kind of halfway up. It was in the shade the whole day, and it's surprisingly cold in Alberta at this time of year. So, you know, we were wearing our beanies, and it was pretty chilly. We didn't have a whole lot of fun on this climb, and there was a lot of loose rock that we weren't really prepared for. At one point, Scott knocked a rock loose that was as big as I was, and it came straight for me, and I just kind of waited until it decided which direction to go, and I, at the last minute, dove left and rock right.
That was in an area that was actually called the gravel pit, so we probably should have known that we were going to encounter a lot of loose rock. Here's us at the peak again with our summit beers, enjoying the nice view. Our facial hair getting pretty furry. And then we definitely should have been wearing our helmets on this climb, and we were stupid and didn't. So when we were rappelling back down, also in the Beta on Mountain Project it says to hike down. We didn't see that. We left our shoes and helmets at the bottom, so we had to wrap down because we didn't really want to hike in our climbing shoes. We were 3 pitches from the bottom, and Scott pulled the rope, and it knocked a rock loose and got me on the top of the head. So I had to go to the hospital, and they wanted to give me 2 stitches, but I opted for super glue instead. And so this was the last climbing that I did on this trip. So wear your helmets, kids. This is in Fernie, BC. My cousin and his wife live here, and they're both chefs, so that was fun. We went on a nice hike up to, was it Mount Hosmer? Or we want to pronounce that. Again, not that long of a hike, but really steep. Just beautiful views in the Canadian Rockies. This is the last little bit of the hike. It's kind of a ridge hike. There's Scott down there. I'm kind of at the peak. And then from Fernie, we actually split up for a few days. I went further west, and Scott went down to Idaho. I have a great uncle who lived in Penticton, BC, who was a huge inspiration in my life, and he had passed away a couple of years earlier. And so I went to visit his wife, Rena, who's 94, who still lives by herself in their house. And this is... he's a PhD in astrophysics, and he was a radio astronomer his whole life. And he built this on his roof. It's a heliostat, so this mirror kind of tracks the sun, and it reflects light into this mirror, and then through the sunroof, and then into this mirror, and then onto this chandelier. So anytime the sun is up, there is sun on this chandelier. It's not the nicest chandelier, but there's a lot of sentimental value to my Aunt Rena. So my uncle did this when he was in like his 70s, programming in Fortran, and yeah, so, anyway, brilliant man. And I had to go see this. Right before he passed away, they dedicated the radio telescope that he worked on his whole life. This is an 85-foot diameter radio telescope, and he worked at this observatory from 1957 until 1990 when he retired, but he was still publishing papers based on his research until 2004, so like just a couple of years before he died. So he was very into his job, and he also had this fascination with building unrideable bicycles. So this is one where he reversed the steering, so you had to steer in the opposite direction. His son David, he was the only one who could master driving it. And here's a picture of my Uncle John after trying to ride it. You can see he has a broken leg. So he had a few of these. He's like a little mini museum of just unrideable bicycles. Okay, so while Nick went west into Penticton, west into Penticton, I went south into Idaho. You may have seen this picture in the AAC Colors photo contest, yes. But, so that was taken at the summit of a formation called Slick Rock, which is right outside of McCall, Idaho. And I went down to visit some friends that were down there, had a sweet pizza party, a lot of beer, really fun. And then the next day I went and soloed a route called the regular route. It's a 5.6, about 1,000 feet tall. This is me at the summit, giving my mahalos, taking this picture. Yay. After that, Nick had already gone through Glacier National Park. Do you have any pictures in there? Okay, so Nick has some pictures in here. This is a picture that I took in Glacier National Park from the top of Mount Piegan. It was a really cool hike, but I got soaked on the way down from all these rain clouds that are coming in. Super exciting.
This was a hike I took to Avalanche Lake in Glacier National Park. Highly recommended. Not a very hard hike, but definitely very scenic. This is just outside of Glacier National Park on the east side, where I waited for Scott for a couple days while he finished lollygagging in Idaho. I went up, this was the night of the Perseids meteor shower, so I went up to take some pictures of the meteor shower. You can see one right there. Oh yeah, so on the way to this campground, I was driving there, and along the side of the road there were 3 deer kind of hopping along in the field. And so I slowed down a little bit just in case one of them was dumb enough to run out in front of me. And of course one of them was, and it kind of hopped across the road, and it kind of seemed like it was going in slow motion. It just like hopped through the air and until it went over the fence, and its back legs caught the top of the fence, and it just kind of ate shit and did somersaults into the field. But it got up and ran off, but I was busy laughing, man. So. This is the Grand Canyon of Yellowstone. Oh yeah, we had, so at that campground, I forgot a very important part of the story. So at the campground, when Scott and I met back up, we actually decided to end the trip. It just wasn't going the way that we had planned. We weren't really having fun. It was we were having a little bit of fun, but it was too many miles for the time that we had set aside for it. So it was putting stress on us and on our friendship, and we just decided that it was best to call it quits, and do a few more things in the U.S. and then head back home. So at this point we had already split. So these are my pictures to Yellowstone. Yeah, just a bunch of geysers, not too far from Old Faithful. Thank you. This is in Jackson Hole. My foot was bothering me that day, so I decided to take the tram up to the top of the mountain instead of hiking up. We got to see a moose. There was one just chilling in the grass all the way up, so that was cool. He didn't run in front of me this time. And then the same day, I tried to make it to a friend's house in Moab to stay the night. He has kind of a vacation house, and he said that I was free to stay there for a few days while I checked out the parks in Utah and stuff. But about 2 hours away from Moab, just dead center Utah, at night, there was a cow in the middle of the road, a black cow at night in the middle of the road that I hit at about 50 miles an hour and totaled my motorcycle. At least this time I was wearing a helmet. But yeah, I don't really remember much from the accident. I remember seeing the cow and then a couple of brief memories, and then I kind of woke up in the hospital and they were telling me that I was fine, other than the fact that I had a broken wrist. Which I was surprised because my left hand hurt a hell of a lot more than my right. So here are a few. I later found out that my left hand was pretty smashed up. You can see there's my right wrist, so this bone broke right here. And then on my left hand, all 4 of my metacarpals popped out of place just a little bit. So they put pins in to hold them in place. But this bone and this bone were also broken. So you can see here the metacarpals are just kind of out of place. It should be straight through there. This is me finding out that my left hand is broken. My left leg, it hurt more than anything else, but it didn't actually, there was nothing broken. It was just really badly contused. I think my motorcycle landed on it and kind of slid across the highway. So this is this was my trip. This is what I ended up doing in the end. Oh yeah, so what the surgeon told me was that basically I must have like made a fist and hit something really hard. So I'm hoping that I punched the cow in the ass on the way by. But I don't know if that actually happened or not, because I don't remember.
So I didn't know Nick had gotten in this accident since we had split up basically right after Glacier National Park, right? Right after Glacier National Park. So I went further down into Montana after we split up, and I did some more solo climbing. This is a climb called the Skyline Arete in Gallatin Canyon. So yeah. And this is just a picture of the climb. Super exciting. And then after that, I headed into the Wind River Range. This is where I was bivvying at. Obviously a beautiful view next to a beautiful lake, at least in the picture. Not really that beautiful in person. There were a bunch of dead fish heads in the water and stuff, and I got to boil a lot of water because I ran out, and it was really exciting. So when I was in the Wind River Range, I hiked out. And the first day I hiked out, it's about a 10-mile hike from the Big Sandy Trailhead out to the Cirque of the Towers, which this is a better picture of the Cirque of the Towers. The climb I did is back here, sort of highlighted by the sun. And the Cirque of the Towers, like, probably one of the most beautiful areas I've ever been in, and even just the hike out there is worthwhile. It's about a 10-mile hike there and back. So the first day I hiked out, I got rained out, which was unfortunate because there was a lot of hiking. And then the second day I hiked out, I actually got to do the climb that I was trying to do. It's called the East Ridge. It's on the Wolf's Head, and it's just a really cool, aesthetic, easy climb with some really cool exposure if you want it, and super highly recommended. If you ever get out to Wyoming, go out to the Wind River Range. Really worthwhile. Yeah, like I said, this is it. This is the Cirque of the Towers. There's more out there. This is just one area. So, just another view. Really beautiful scenery. So after Wyoming, I headed down into Colorado to visit some family. And after I had split up with Nick, I had decided that I wanted to keep continuing on with the idea that I was going to climb in every state on my way back home. So in Colorado, I climbed on the first Flatiron, which is right here. So I just did a little solo on the, I think it's called the East Face, up to the North Ridge, which leads up to the summit here. I got this photo on here because at the summit I ran into a ton of bugs, which I really hate if you've been listening to this presentation, and they were just swarming me at the top, so I just wrapped off as quick as I could and took this picture at the bottom. And then on my way out of Colorado, I rode onto the highest paved road in North America, which is, I think, Mount Evans? Mount Evans, and there's some climbers here that are much better than I, these mountain goats. Climbing all over this building that was destroyed by a propane explosion in, I think, the 1930s or something like that. But there's an observatory at the top of this, and it's actually a really cool place to visit. I was there right at sunrise, and pretty exciting. So after Colorado, I headed into Utah. I was in the Moab area, and I really wanted to climb the Stolen Chimney on Ancient Art, but I'm a kind of a timid person, so I really couldn't find a partner, so I decided to go on a hike in Arches National Park instead. And this is the Skyline Arch, I think it's called, and it's really amazing how these things can just, first of all, form in nature, second of all, not completely collapse on themselves. But I guess that's why the arch is the strongest architectural structure that you can come across. So. After Arches National Park, I headed into Zion. Still didn't have a climbing partner, so I just ran up the Angel's Landing Trail, and that was pretty exciting. Really good view at the top. Even just driving through Zion National Park is pretty amazing. I recommend that you visit it. And then after that, I headed into, I actually didn't get my Utah climbing in, so I headed into Nevada, and I visited my friend Daryl in Las Vegas. And him and I actually drove back to Utah to this place called Cedar Canyon, and we got in a bunch of really fun multi-pitch sport climbing. And so I checked out my Utah climbing right there, and super fun. And I'm not a single pitch sport climber type of person. I like to get on the higher stuff, but this is a really fun day. And after that, my last climbing of this trip was in Nevada, and since it was August, it was August, towards the end of August, it was still super hot in Red Rocks, so we went up to Mount Charleston, and if you can see me up in the top corner of this picture right here, it's just really fun climbing on limestone, and this is like a wave of this rock that's called chert, and it's basically a bunch of crimpers like you would find in the gym. It's just super fun climbing. And then, sadly, a few days ago, I sold my motorcycle. So Nick doesn't have a motorcycle. I don't have a motorcycle. Nobody has any motorcycles. We're not going to finish this trip on motorcycles. But I think someday we'd both like to finish it in a van or something like that, so that, you know, we can be a little bit more comfortable. So that's the end of our slideshow. We have, thank you. We have a short video to show you, and despite what Nick said about not having fun, it's more of a, what is it, type 2 or type 3? Whichever one you look back on it and you think, wow, that was amazing, like that was super fun. So this is our video. We had hours and hours and hours and hours and hours and hours of GoPro footage, and we cut it down to 5 minutes. So this is really just one of those GoPro edits that you see on the website, and with some techno music to it or whatever, and it'll be fun. It's good to look at and reminisce for us. So thank you very much.
Thanks. Yeah, and thanks to like everybody who's a member of the AAC, because your memberships helped fund the Live Your Dream grant, which we won to do this trip. So thank you, and hopefully some of you will win this grant in the future. Just talk to Peter and Jonathan.
Usually they start letting you apply in I think February. February, Peter?
Yeah,
February? Okay. So yeah, just look out for that, apply for it, and you can get some money to go on your dream trip. And it's free. It's free to get free money. They probably won't pay for your trip, but you'll definitely get some free money.